All right, so we have Ryan back from You Are the Power, and tell us a little bit about Corey and Diana Sullivan.
Sure. So Corey and Diana Sullivan is a family that You Are the Power is supporting and sponsoring here in Georgia. Corey and Diana live in Camden County. And really, before we get into their story, I wanted to lay a little bit of groundwork about what's been going on, specifically with their case as it relates to the DFACS office there in Camden County and some, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course.
Sure. So Corey and Diana Sullivan, they did have their three children seized by DFACS, and this took place about a year ago. And so over the course of the past several months, You Are the Power has been working around the clock to try to bring about effectual change within the DFACS office in Camden County. We've been applying as much public pressure as possible and working in conjunction with Corey and Diana's defense team. We've been able to bring about some significant changes over the past few weeks. In particular, I wanted to point out that two investigators in Camden County have recently been arrested. One was a female investigator. She was arrested for DUI. She's still on the job. Obviously, she's innocent until proven guilty, and so she's allowed to stay on the job and continue to work with children. However, there was a male investigator who was arrested for aggravated sodomy. This particular investigator was propositioning the mothers of the children that DFACS had in state's care and was asking for sexual favors, and he promised if he received those sexual favors that he would return their children. Obviously, he does not have the power to do that, and so he used his position of authority over these women to exploit them and to gain sexual favors. This is something that he acknowledged, and as a result, was terminated for his actions. Additionally, what we've experienced is specifically for Corey and Diana's case manager, and I'm not going to name him simply because he's not been formally charged or indicted for his actions, although we do anticipate that he will be investigated criminally, is that he was alleged to have engaged in inappropriate contact with children, to have inappropriate relationships with children, specifically the children in his care. He was going over to various elementary schools and middle schools, and he was actually checking these children out of school and taking them to get ice cream and things like that. So like he wasn't taking them out because he wanted to take them to therapy or take the children out to come to court or for a meeting. He was taking it upon himself to take these children out of school and to take them on what he called field trips. And there was also allegations that, and we're unsure at this point in time if it was a state computer or if it was his personal computer that he was using for state business, but he loaned his computer to a child, and on the computer, in the internet browser history specifically, it was nothing but pornography after pornography after pornography. And so initially, DFACS investigated this particular caseworker and determined that he had done nothing wrong. So Corey and Diana Sullivan's one of their defense attorneys went public with this information and held a press conference. And during that press conference, these items were laid out one by one. And shortly thereafter, management and DFACS decided to take action, and they gave this particular caseworker the option to resign in lieu of termination. And as a result, from what we understand, and we have not been able to confirm this, is that as a result of his actions, law enforcement is now investigating this particular caseworker for his inappropriate behavior working with children while he was an employee at DFACS.
Well,
Wow.
good. That's good. It's
That
horrible
is.
that it has to come to that, but wow.
Yeah, and another positive aspect of the public pressure that we're putting on this particular office, again in conjunction with Corey and Diana's defense team, is they recently had a middle manager out of the DFACS office resign as a result of the public scrutiny that her office is receiving. In addition to that, the special attorney general in charge of the Camden County DFACS office, who's been in that position for quite some time, he recently resigned based on based on the public pressure that we've been able to put on You Are the Power and the defense team there for Corey and Diana has been able to put on the Camden County DFACS office, and in particular, the Office of the Family Court Judge. So we're excited about that. I know that those are some topics that are kind of troublesome to talk about and to think about. But if it weren't for the public pressure that we've been able to put on that particular office, the general public would have no idea about the extent of the corruption that lies there within Camden County DFACS.
Wow.
So another thing that, and I'm not sure if we talked about this, if we spoke about this on a previous episode, was Camden County, Georgia, specifically Camden County Family Court, has the lowest reunification rate in the state of Georgia. It hovers at around 10 to 11%, which means that, around 90% of the time, if a child is seized by DFACS and the case is brought before family court judge, and in Camden County, there's only one family court judge. If it's brought before the family court judge, then 90% of the time, those parents are going to lose their rights to their children, and their children are going to be put up for adoption. And why this is just so significant is that we've been able to uncover that there seems to be an incestuous relationship between DFACS, the Special Attorney General, and the family court judge there in Camden County. As a matter of fact, Corey and Diana Sullivan's caseworker would often brag that he and the Special Attorney General and the juvenile court judge, the family court judge, were all buddies. They would go walk their dogs together. They go hunt together. They go barbecuing together. And it leads us to believe that there's impropriety, or at least the existence of an inappropriate relationship between that family court judge, the DFACS office, and the the Assistant Attorney General's office there in Camden County. And I know that judges are supposed to be impartial, but when you're looking at a reunification rate of 10 or 11%, then there's something going on in Camden County that needs to be addressed. And that's one of the reasons why we're so vocal and going public and drawing attention to the corruption that's going on specifically in Camden County. And I really would like the opportunity, to talk about Corey and Diana's case. It's tragic, like all the families that we're supporting here in Georgia. Corey and Diana Sullivan, really and truly, they have a fairy tale story. And it's unfortunate right now that they're contended with a wicked witch and an evil stepmother kind of rolled into one in the form of DFACS and the family court judge there in Camden County. But Corey and Diana, they met in middle school.
Wow.
They've been together since middle school. They married when they were 21 years old. They've been happily married for almost 20 years. I mean, they're parents to 3 beautiful children, 2 twins, and then their oldest daughter, Arabella. All 3 of Corey and Diana's babies were born via IVF procedures. Corey and Diana, they struggled with infertility issues for 14 years, the first 14 years of their marriage. And they spent most of their life savings on those IVF procedures before getting pregnant with Arabella, their oldest daughter. When Arabella was 2 years old, Corey and Diana wanted nothing more than to give their daughter a brother or a sister. And so really as a last-ditch effort, they tried for twins. Corey and Diana, again, used IVF, and they were intentionally trying for twins. And to their surprise, they were blessed with both a boy and a girl. Corey and Diana found out that Diana was pregnant, and that she was pregnant with twins, a little boy and a little girl. And so this is where the story kind of takes a turn. I don't say for the worse, but this is the catalyst for some of the things that Corey and Diana are currently going through. When Diana was pregnant, their boy, Christian, the twin boy, and little girl, Amelia, they had separate placentas. And so Christian was thriving, growing. However, Amelia was not. She had issues with protein levels, and she was just simply not gaining weight like Christian. And so during the 3rd trimester, Diana underwent a series of tests, a battery of tests, and it was determined that Amelia was medically fragile. So she was determined to have interuterine growth restriction, anemia, low platelet levels, limited bone mineral disposition, delayed bone development, softness of the spine, demilitarization of the spine, and softness of her bones. So as a matter of fact, Diana's doctor told Corey and her that if she were to try to deliver the babies naturally, it would likely break every bone in baby Amelia's body. So out of an abundance of caution, Diana underwent an emergency C-section, and both the twins were taken in that respect. And so when the babies were born, Amelia just weighed about 3 pounds and spent the first 42 days of her life in a NICU. And so Diana spent a lot of that time at home with their baby Arabella and then the newborn Christian. And Corey spent the majority of his time in the hospital with the nurses and the doctor staff taking care of baby Amelia. After Amelia was discharged from the NICU, she was still under 1% of the natural growth scale rate, and she was having difficulty maintaining her weight, and she was having difficulty keeping her food down. She would throw up uncontrollably. And so what they started to do, like any loving parent would do, Corey and Diana, we take their baby to the doctor for checkups, find out what's going on. They took baby Amelia to the doctor. Her right thigh was swollen up. They took her to a local hospital here in Camden County. And during an x-ray, they found a fracture in baby Amelia's leg. The doctor there at the hospital recommended that Corey and Diana take Amelia to Wilson Children's Hospital in Jacksonville, Florida, because Corey and Diana just live right there on the Florida-Georgia line. Because of Amelia's size, the doctors at the local hospital were a little concerned about how they were going to splint or cast Amelia's leg. And so when they got down to Wilson's Children's Hospital in Jacksonville, that's really where the nightmare began for Corey and Diana. They ran into Dr. Barbara Knox, and Dr. Barbara Knox is a child abuse pediatrician. Dr. Barbara Knox has a questionable background and a questionable past. And really what I mean by that is she's worked at other children's hospitals around the country, and she was asked to resign in lieu of termination at both facilities, one in Wisconsin and the other in Alaska. As a matter of fact, she was accused of bullying her staff. Dr. Knox was accused of trying to convince her staff to lie and say that there was parents were abusing their children when no abuse actually occurred. As a matter of fact, at both facilities, Dr. Knox's entire staff at the Wisconsin facility quit on her, resigned in protest, and the same thing happened when Dr. Knox was employed at a children's hospital in Alaska. Her entire staff resigned because they accused Dr. Knox of bullying. The administration wasn't listening to what the staff was saying, and out of protest, the entire staff in Alaska resigned as well. Dr. Knox ends up in Florida with privileges to practice at Wilson's Children's Hospital, and that's where Corey and Diana ran into Dr. Knox. Dr. Knox reviewed the x-rays and immediately accused Corey and Diana of abusing baby Amelia. Now you got to remember, at the time, Amelia weighed about 6.5 pounds, right? She could fit in the palm of your hand. She was already medically fragile. She had conditions that were diagnosed in utero. Dr. Knox did not take any of that into consideration. And so when she accused Corey and Diana of abusing baby Amelia, as a matter of fact, Dr. Knox said that it was likely that Corey either slammed baby Amelia against the wall or drop kicked baby Amelia into a wall, and that's how she sustained some of her injuries. Now, one thing you have to understand is there is no evidence that any of this occurred, right? There's no evidence that Corey or Diana abused their baby. They brought their daughter to the hospital. Unbeknownst to them, Amelia had a fracture in her leg. And so rather than doing a complete workup there, Dr. Knox immediately said, well, this is indicative of abuse or non-accidental trauma, and notified, because Corey and Diana live in Georgia, but they just happen to be at a facility in Florida. They notified DFACS in Georgia that Corey and Diana were accused of abusing their baby. And one of the things that we found, and I know we've previously spoken about this, when you talk about child abuse pediatricians is, they're not criminal investigators. They don't have the training. They don't have the knowledge or the wherewithal to determine what is or what is not abuse. They cannot say within a degree of medical certainty how these injuries or how these fractures occurred in these medically fragile children. They simply go by a mathematical certainty, right? They say, well, based on these fractures, it's 80% likely that they're non-accidental trauma. And what DFACS and what local law enforcement, and to a certain extent, what these child abuse pediatricians don't account for is that other 20%, right? The 20% where these quote unquote injuries are not due to non-accidental trauma. They are due to underlying health conditions or underlying medical conditions of these babies. And so what we're finding time and time again is law enforcement and DFACS, specifically here in Georgia, are taking the medical opinion of a child abuse pediatrician and they're saying that these are facts rather than opinions. And rather than doing their due diligence, rather than a child abuse pediatrician ordering a full workup on these children, they stop when they say, okay, it's 80% likely that this is a non-accidental trauma. And so that's where the doctors are failing their patients. That's where law enforcement fails to do their due diligence. And that's where DFACS fails to do their due diligence as well, because they're simply relying on one opinion of one doctor and they're stating it as fact. But there are other plausible, lawful medical explanations for the injuries that these children are presenting. And I say injuries, that's my term. It's not a medical term, but that's what law enforcement calls them. That's what these child abuse pediatricians are calling them. When they see these multiple fractures in various stages of healing. So, of course, Corey and Diana have never abused their child. There's no history of abuse when it comes to their children. They've spent tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars to have these children. They've done nothing but be protective of their babies from the time that they were born up until the time that they were brought to the hospital. And as a result of one child abuse pediatrician's opinion, their lives were turned upside down. So DFACS gets involved here in Camden County, where Corey and Diana live. They don't do any independent investigative measures. They undertake no independent investigative measures. They don't go out and talk to neighbors. They don't go out and talk to co-workers or bosses of Corey and Diana. They don't talk to extended family of Corey and Diana and try to make any determination if there's some type of history of abuse or Corey and Diana have some type of marital issues. They do none of the above. As a matter of fact, local law enforcement decides they don't even want to get involved in the case, and they turn the matter over to the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation, the special agent who is handling Corey and Diana's investigation, they again rely solely on the opinion of a child abuse pediatrician. They do no independent investigative work. They again only interview Diana's mother, and Diana's mother confirms that there's no history of abuse. Corey and Diana are wonderful parents, loving parents. They're a loving husband and wife, and there's no way in the world that they would have done anything to harm baby Amelia. Law enforcement doesn't interview Corey or Diana. Law enforcement doesn't take a look at Amelia's records, her health records. They don't take a look at Amelia's charts. They don't take a look at Corey's medical history. They don't take a look at Diana's OB-GYN records. They don't take a look at the birth trauma that Amelia sustained both in utero and right after she was born. None of that was taken into consideration. The only thing that we can say that Dr. Knox did that we deem is appropriate is that she actually ordered a full panel of genetic testing and ordered that more testing be done on baby Amelia to rule out genetic conditions. However, once the state took possession of all three of Corey and Diana's children, those tests were not performed because according to DFACS, Dr. Knox cannot be discredited, and so those tests were not ordered, or nor were they followed through with. Initially, all three of Corey and Diana's children were placed in foster care into the care of strangers. Ultimately, or shortly thereafter, Diana's mother was allowed to take care and custody of Arabella, and then Corey's father took in the two twins. Corey's father and his wife ended up having to move out of state, and so Corey and Diana petitioned the courts to allow Diana's mother to take all three of her grandchildren. The judge, the juvenile court judge, the family court judge, after several months, relented. But the stipulations were that Corey and Diana had to move out of their home, and that Diana's mother was allowed to move into the home to take care of all three of her grandchildren. DFACS wanted and asked the judge to order that Corey and Diana pay over $2,000 a month in child support for their children, and plus be responsible for all the medical care and all the medical care of their babies. And of course, Corey and Diana, agreed to that because they want to do what's in the best interest of their babies. While they were going through this process, Macy and Natalie, Diana went through a series or battery of tests. She was determined to have EDS, or Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And as a result, it's 50% likely that is what, medically, it's 50% likely that is what Amelia is suffering from.
That's exactly
Amelia her records were sent to multiple specialists around the country and even overseas. And all the doctors agreed that Amelia has, with her bones and her joints, that the fractures that were displayed in her radiologist reports, both at a local hospital and at Wilson's, were not due to trauma. They were due to like a vitamin D deficiency. They were due to OI. They were due to hypermobility and other concerns that were connected with EDS. At no point in time did the juvenile court judge or the family court judge in Camden County take into consideration the opinions of the other medical experts. Again, DFACS, and at this point, the SAG and the juvenile court judge or family court judge ruled against those medical experts and deemed that Dr. Barbara Knox was credible, that Dr. Barbara Knox, her opinion was factual, and that Corey and Diana no longer needed to care for their babies, that they were dependent upon the state for care. So here we are almost a year later. Corey has not seen baby Amelia since December. Corey is not allowed to have unsupervised visits with Arabella or Christian. Diana and Corey are not allowed to have joint visits with their three children. Diana is only allowed to have supervised visits with her three children in a neutral or at a family center, advocacy center there in Camden County. Corey was arrested. He was charged with 2 felonies under Georgia's Family Violence Act. He's facing 60 years in confinement. He has been arrested, but he's not been indicted. We're waiting on word from the district attorney there in Camden County. And then we just haven't heard back from them yet. We're hoping that the district attorney will do the right thing. We'll take a look at the totality of the evidence, both on the prosecutorial side and on the defense side, and come to the right conclusion and make the right decision that Corey did nothing to cause harm to his baby, and that these are underlying health conditions, and that the testimony and that the opinion of Dr. Knox is going to be flawed based on her history of bullying staff, trying to get her staff to lie, just out and out lie and say that abuse occurred when none did not. And as a matter of fact, Corey and Diana go back to court next month. The state is moving to terminate their parental rights and put all 3 of their children up for adoption. And so what we're doing right now, we're trying our best to prevent that from happening. Corey and Diana's defense team is working around the clock to make sure that doesn't happen. We're on an email campaign right now with the governor. We're sending emails out to the district attorney. We're sending emails out to the management personnel at DFACS. And of course, no one's responding to us. But we're hoping that the family court judge come July 30th, when Corey and Diana go back to court, will do what's right, listen to the experts that aren't on the state's payroll and that aren't working for the state, and return all three of Corey and Diana's babies to their parents, ending this nightmare once and for all.
That is so sad.
It is sad. And I forgot to mention, as a matter of fact, right after Corey and Diana's case manager was afforded the opportunity to resign in lieu of termination, it was brought to our attention and to their defense team's attention that DFACS hired a transportation company out of Jacksonville, Florida, to drive up to the DFACS office in Camden County and remove all the electronics from the office. Fax machines, computers, copying machines. We have pictures of this moving company taking all the electronics out of the DFACS office. One of Diana and Corey's attorneys, Mr. Kevin Goff, he filed an injunction that is now preventing DFACS from destroying the hard drives on those electronic equipment. We don't know where that electronic equipment is being stored. We don't know if it's currently being held in Jacksonville or if it's stored in a warehouse here in Georgia. That matter has not been before a judge yet, but it seems a little coincidental to me that when DFACS has an employee engaged in inappropriate relationship with children, that 2 or 3 days after he resigns in lieu of termination, they start trying to remove all the electronic equipment out of their office, and they hire an out-of-state company to do it.
Well, that's not shady.
No, not at all.
Jeez.
We did a little bit of digging on the company, and I'm not going to name them because they're just a third-party vendor. But the owner of the company's wife works for Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, I mean, read into it what you like.
Yep.
But, you got state government in Georgia contacting somebody in Jacksonville, Florida, who happens to work for the governor, who's the owner of the company's wife happens to work for the governor of Florida, and says, hey, why don't you come up here and remove all the electronics out of this DFACS office, especially after one of the employees is accused of basically engaging in grooming behavior against the children that are in his care.
Wow. And you all just don't know where it is. How is that legal?
Well, that was the question that that we all asked is, if the moving company, logistics company, took the equipment out of the state, who authorized them to take that electronic equipment across state lines and store it in Florida, if that's in fact where it's at?
Yeah.
Number two, if it's in Georgia, why is that equipment being housed off-site? Why the urgency? Why the sense of urgency to remove all the electronic equipment out of the DFACS office and bring in new equipment? There's no telling how many tens of thousands of dollars it costs the taxpayers to have the equipment removed from the DFACS office, and then replaced. And because you've got 3 bad actors in that office, right? You've got one who's accused of driving drunk, when this is the same investigator who drives children around. 2, you have an employee that's engaged in felonious acts when he's using his position of power and authority over these women, and he's asking for sexual favors. So I know that some of that was communicated via government phones, via government computers. And then number 3, you have Corey and Diana's own case manager, who's accused of engaging in inappropriate contact, and I can almost guarantee you that inappropriate contact took place both online with computers, and he used his, government-funded cell phone that he was receiving a stipend for, to send text messages or to make phone calls to check these children out of school.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems to me that DFACS is really in panic mode, and they're really trying to cover their tracks the best they can. If it wasn't for a concerned citizen who reached out and said, hey, look, there's a moving truck here in the Camden County DFACS parking lot. They're unloading all their equipment. So we had one of the mothers who has their children in state's care right now drive over to the Camden County DFACS parking lot and start taking pictures and start taking video of this moving truck. We did a little research, found out where, based on the DOT numbers on the side of the truck, where the truck was home based out of, the company, and then we just started doing our own digging, and we immediately notified Corey and Diana's defense team to let them know what was going on. And in return, one of their attorneys, Mr. Kevin Goff, took action and filed that injunction. But if it wasn't for somebody stepping forward and saying, hey, look, there's something funny going on here, DFACS would have gotten away with moving all the electronic equipment out of their office and probably either wiped out or destroyed some of those hard drives on that electronic equipment, basically destroying evidence of their employees engaged in felony conduct.
Wow. I feel like anything that was taken out of that office should be thrown out in court too. The evidence is being tampered with.
Yes.
Like
Yes.
it should all the cases,
Yes.
everything that has happened.
It has not. The chain of custody.
Yeah,
like,
the chain.
it's
Yeah, they've
all
broken
messed
it.
up.
So
yes.
all the charges should be cleared.
Yep.
It's we're concerned that, because the Special Assistant Attorney General that was managing these cases recently resigned, right? So after all this stuff was made public, he resigned. And so now they have a new SAG working on behalf of DFACS who's coming into quite a mess. Like she's inherited quite a mess. And so how can we as citizens trust what DFACS is saying when they go to court and they offer testimony against people like Corey and Diana Sullivan? How can we take their testimony as factual when we know that their own employees have frequently lied and engaged in criminal activity themselves? And now you have, I'm assuming, in order to have all this electronic equipment moved out of one office, that order had to come from someone higher than a county manager. Those type of decisions have to be made at a director level out of the main headquarters office in Atlanta for DFACS. You just can't say, I want, $20,000 or $30,000 worth of new electronics delivered out of one office, and I want all the old electronics removed without the thumbs up or the approval of someone at headquarters in Atlanta. I've been around state government, worked within state government. Those type of decisions are not made at a local level. You can't spend tens of thousands of taxpayer dollars and not get the green light from headquarters in Atlanta.
And what is this headquarters?
It is DFACS' headquarters in Atlanta, but DFACS is under the umbrella of Georgia's Department of Human Services, Health and Human Services. And so Candace Broach, she's the commissioner of DHS, and she's the director of DFACS. She's not an elected personnel. She's appointed by Governor Kemp. And so those type of decisions, I can assure you, are not being made at a local level. Candace and those at headquarters in Atlanta, they are given the green light to have that type of change made inside of a DFACS office. You just can't spend that much money, hire a company from Florida, and make all the electronic equipment in one office disappear without somebody in Atlanta not knowing what's going on.
That's crazy.
It is. It blows my mind that, DFACS is allowed to engage in this type of behavior, and yet they're down here literally ripping families apart, fracturing families based on the opinion of one doctor. They're not, think about that. Two investigators, the ones who are charged with investigating moms and dads like Corey and Diana, right, are out driving drunk, are out soliciting, using their positions of authority and soliciting sex and soliciting sexual acts from mothers who have had their children seized, right? And then yet these are the people that are going to come to court and testify, raise their hand and say under oath that the actions that they've taken prior to this are truthful and accurate. There's just no way that a judge should take the testimony of a DFACS worker in Camden County as truthful and as accurate, that should be scrutinized from the top down. Like any decision that's being made out of that Camden County DFACS office needs to be scrutinized. And the fact that the state is moving so quickly and trying to seize and put up Corey and Diana's 3 babies for adoption without even giving them an opportunity to work through a case plan, without even giving them an opportunity to explain themselves through their attorneys, through independent medical experts, that the state is so hell-bent on seizing and putting their 3 children up for adoption while the employees in that office are actually engaging in felony behavior. It blows my mind that this is allowed to continue, that the governor's office is not stepping in and doing something about this and ordering a review of each and every one of these cases that are being, not only, I'm going to call it prosecuted, but are being brought before the family court judge in Camden County. Every single one of them should be reviewed by the Attorney General's office in Atlanta. There should be a pause on every one of these cases. Any family who is up for the termination of parental rights should have their case immediately paused and reviewed before a decision is made, a final decision is made to terminate parental rights. Corey and Diana Sullivan deserve this. They do not deserve to have their babies taken away because of the opinion of one doctor and the opinions and of a corrupt and a corruptible Camden County DFACS. It absolutely blows my mind that nobody is stepping in independent. I mean, from the governor's office, lieutenant governor's office, the attorney general's office, nobody is taking a look at this and saying something has got to give. This is corrupt, the system is broken, and it needs to be fixed. And yet they're moving full steam ahead and terminating parental rights.
That's crazy. And what makes me like upset even more is, they're using all these resources to go to children that aren't being abused. What's happening to the children that are being abused?
Right.
Why aren't they using those resources for good?
Correct.
For what they're meant for.
Yeah.
We've asked those same questions, right? Because you have Title 4E funds, right, that comes into a state, then it goes and is distributed out to these local offices. These federal funds that are put into place to help children who are in state's care, right?
Right.
Georgia took in about $150 million last year in federal funds to support children and to support families who are involved in Georgia's foster care system. But yet, DFACS's priority is protecting their employees who are engaged in felony criminal acts and trying to cover for them by, hiring companies to come in and remove electronics out of an office. Like, I don't understand what the priority is from headquarters in Atlanta. I don't understand what the priority is from the governor's office. I don't even understand what the priority is at the local level of some of these DFACS offices. Because to me, they're not protecting the children. They're not protecting the most vulnerable of our population here in Georgia, the ones who need to be protected most. They're failing time and time again. They're failing these families. And what's even worse is they're failing these children.
Yeah. Wow. You mentioned EDS.
Yes.
With Amelia.
Yes.
Last week we talked to Tracy, Tara Lynn's mom, and Tyler.
Yes.
And their oldest also had that, which we were sitting here and we're like, EDS, we just heard this.
Yep.
Wow.
And I will say this, all but 2 of the families that we're sponsoring right now and supporting in Georgia, that You Are the Power is supporting in Georgia, all but 2 of the families, their babies and the parents have EDS.
Wow.
Right. So these are medically fragile children. And so one of the things that we're looking at, and I think mathematically it's astronomical that a child abuse pediatrician can not look at all the evidence that we can present, right? So you've got 6 families in Georgia right now that You Are the Power is supporting. All of them are medically fragile in some way, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you look at when these diagnoses are being made of non-accidental trauma, it's occurring anywhere between 6 to 12 weeks of age when these babies are really starting to move around a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And so not only that is most of this quote unquote non-accidental trauma are occurring in the same locations of these babies, even though these babies are scattered throughout the state, right? So it's rib fractures in various stages of healing. It's fractures in wrists, it's fractures in the femur, it's fractures in ankles, right? So you can't tell me that a doctor cannot look at each one of these cases independently and say, I've found a pattern, right?
Mm-hmm.
These babies are medically fragile. The mothers experience birth trauma. The mothers experience issues in utero with their babies.
Mm-hmm.
All these babies are the same age when they're brought to the hospital for the first time. These moms and dads all have EDS. These moms or dads have OI. These moms and dads all experience hypermobility, right? The babies have hypermobility. So you can take a look at it across the board. I can look at all this and go, hey, something's not right. An independent journalist can look at this and go, hey, something's not right. This is clearly not abuse. You guys can take a look at these medical records and go, hey, something's not right. This is clearly not abuse. But yet when you go before a family court judge and you have the opinion of one child abuse pediatrician who says it's non-accidental trauma, they discredit everybody else and don't listen to what anyone else has to say. And it's like they put their blinders on and they go, full bore, let's take these children, let's put them up for adoption, and let's arrest mom and dad.
That's crazy. So on July 30th, when the Sullivans go back to court,
Yes.
if and hopefully not, but if their parental rights are terminated, would it be possible for Diana's mother to get custody since she
Or
has
to
them?
adopt.
So the short answer is yes, it's possible. What's likely going to happen, and our hope is that it doesn't get to TPR, that the judge makes the right decision and orders reunification. But if the judge makes the wrong decision, and I will say this, the judge gets it wrong at least 90% of the time, right? Because the reunification rate in Camden County is about 10%.
Yep.
So if the judge gets it wrong, which mathematically he's apt to do, Corey and Diana can file an appeal. And so during that appeal process, the three babies would remain with Diana's mother. However, the prior SAG, the one who recently resigned, had mentioned to DFACS that if the judge proceeds with TPR and does not order reunification, he was going to make it as difficult as possible for family to adopt Corey and Diana's babies. So you can just kind of see that vindictive motive coming out, not only at DFACS, but the vindictive motive that comes out through the attorneys that work with DFACS.
Yeah.
Now that that particular SAG retired, I'm hoping that the new SAG does not have that evil spirit about her and is more apt to make decisions based on the law and makes decisions based on logic and reason versus spite and hatred.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really, I don't know any other way to describe it other than spite and hatred, because I've been in those courtrooms with these families. I've read over this documentation. I've seen the actions of the DFACS caseworkers. You can't tell me that, like in Corey and Diana's case, somebody who's grooming children, likely for sexual gratification, has the best interest of reunification at heart when he can go over to a school now that these children are in state's care and check them out and take them to get ice cream, right? He wants the non-reunification. He wants TPR. So he's making those recommendations to his bosses that these families do not need to be reunified. And I think it's number one, selfish, right? Because he's probably doing it for sexual gratification. And then number two, he wants to have unfettered access to children. So that's what I mean by how in the world can any juvenile court judge take the recommendations of someone who, and in my opinion, is a groomer.
Mm-hmm.
How can a judge take his opinion of that caseworker and say, yeah, I'm going to agree with that caseworker who is engaged in inappropriate contact and inappropriate relationships with children? I think that's a good idea that we should terminate those parental rights.
Right.
That makes no sense to me.
Yeah.
And so I'm hoping the judge sees through this facade and makes the right decision and orders reunification in the case of Corey and Diana Sullivan.
And when it comes to Corey, I know he's facing 2 federal counts, up to 60 years in prison. Does he have a separate court date or
So
anything coming up?
right now, because he's only been arrested and he's not been indicted, there's no court date. That's why we've been emailing District Attorney Keith Higgins. Almost every other week, we're sending him emails saying, please reconsider indicting Corey. Please take a look at the totality of all the evidence. Please do your independent research and look at Dr. Knox and her history of getting it wrong. Please take a look at the DFACs in Camden County. Please take a look at their office. Please take a look at their history of getting it wrong, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because Corey and Diana's case manager is the one who's making these recommendations that Corey and Diana should have their parental rights terminated. And so I'm hoping that Mr. Higgins, who by all accounts is a fair and open-minded man and who has really turned around the Camden County District Attorney's Office and is doing good work, I just pray that he takes a look at this case, looks at the totality of everything and says, there's no way I'm going to indict Corey Sullivan on these 2 felony charges. That is clear that baby Amelia was medically fragile. And not only did Barbara Knox get it wrong in Wilton, but so did DFACs in Camden County. And I'm confident that that's going to happen. What I'm less confident on right now is the impartiality of the judge, the family court judge in Camden County. At this point, I do not believe that he is impartial. I do not believe that he is making decisions based on the law. I think he's making decisions based on tainted relationships with SAGs and then Corey Diana's former case manager, the one who's engaged in a litany of inappropriate contact, who brags about being in a personal relationship and being friends with this judge. And he's even told parents in the past, like, hey, there's no need to fight me because me and the judge walk our dogs together. Me and the judge go to barbecues together. We hang out together, after hours, so you don't need to fight me. So I'm hoping that the judge removes that bias from the situation, removes his impartiality, and does the right thing and orders reunification for Corey and Diana Sullivan.
Wow.
This just gets worse and worse.
How old were the twins when they took Amelia to Jacksonville?
So when Amelia was in Jacksonville, they were like 6 to 8 weeks old. Like, they were still nursing. Diana was still nursing her babies. They were really young.
Wow.
So she was in ICU for 42 days, and
Yes.
then a few weeks later, they determined. That's crazy. Corey was there every day
Correct.
for 42
Correct.
days.
Right.
And
with
is charged
plenty
with.
of people around.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's our argument too. Is not only that is when you talk about a baby who is medically fragile, who is diagnosed with a litany of conditions or medical conditions in utero, when that baby is born, it doesn't mean that those medical conditions go away.
Yep.
Right? It just means that you have to treat those conditions outside the womb.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what Corey and Diana did consistently. They were consistently taking Amelia in to make sure that all those health conditions were being addressed. They just happened to notice that her leg was swollen, took her to a local hospital outside Camden County. They did an x-ray and said, well, the baby has a fracture. Corey and Diana had no clue what the heck that means when they say, well, go ahead and take the baby down to Wilson's Children's Hospital. Corey and Diana have no idea how baby Amelia got a fracture. They can speculate, right? Well, we had some issues in utero. She had a complicated birth. She's medically fragile. But Corey and Diana don't know these things. Mm-hmm. And so when they run into Dr. Knox there at Wilson's and Amelia is still 6 or 7 pounds, medically fragile, and Dr. Knox doesn't look at Diana's OBGYN records, doesn't look at any of Amelia's pediatrician records, doesn't look at anything other than an x-ray and say, well, there's a fracture, so by default, it has to be abuse. Like, she doesn't even Dr. Knox doesn't take into account anything that happened prior to Amelia being seen at Wilson's. The only thing Dr. Knox sees is a fracture and goes, well, the only thing that can cause a fracture in a baby is abuse, right?
Not true.
So, which is not true. And Corey and Diana are floored. So when they try to explain themselves, they try to say, look, we don't know what's going on. What happens? Because there's allegations of abuse. Corey and Diana, less than 24 hours later, even though Diana is nursing Amelia and Christian, they literally take baby Amelia out of Diana's arms.
Uh-oh.
We believe that you abused your child. They are not allowed at that point to have any additional contact, try to, explain themselves. The only thing that they're told after that, for the most part, is, hey, you need to go to court in Camden County because we believe you abused your child and we want you to face a judge and answer a judge. Their world is turned upside down, right? They don't know. It's like a whirlwind. You go into the hospital 24 hours later, someone's taking your baby off your breast and saying, you are abused this baby. We're seizing your child. You can no longer care for your own baby.
Wow. Was she able to, I feel like Diana's a mom who will do anything for her kids.
Yeah.
Was she able to, still give them the nutrients from her breast milk? Was she able to, have that kind, do at least something?
Sometimes.
I think she was able to pump. And, Diana is one of the most loving parents I've seen. She literally makes all three of her children, she makes their meals, individually, right? She preps their meals, she makes their meals, she cooks their meals. She uses organic ingredients. She goes to health food stores, and she makes sure that what she's putting, or what her babies are putting into their bodies, is the best possible ingredients, the highest quality ingredients that their babies can have, right? So she was doing everything in her power to make sure that Amelia was getting the vitamins, minerals, the breast milk, the foods, the supplements that she could get. But you have to understand is once the children are in state's care, they start cutting that off, right? They say, well, mom can't have contact with the babies. That's not necessary. Let's perhaps give the baby just some regular formula. So the state's not giving the quality of care that Corey and Diana were given to their own children.
Yeah.
And as a result, and one thing that I forgot to mention is you got to remember, there's never been any allegations of abuse leveled against Diana, right? No one's ever accused Diana of abusing her children, but yet she still can't see it. There's never been any indicators that Christian was abused or that Arabella was abused. But yet, Arabella and Christian were put into state's care. They weren't given to Diana to care for, right? They were put in the care of strangers. So Arabella, over the past year, mentally, physically, and spiritually, she has deteriorated. She is not the same little girl now. She's 4.5 years old. She was seized by the state when she was 3.5 years old. She is suffering undue trauma. Right now, she's contending with anger issues. She was having panic attacks. Can you imagine a 3.5-year-old baby suffering from panic attacks? Who hears of stuff like that?
Yeah.
That's
But
terrible.
you have, because Arabella's been in state's care, she's been around strangers. She's been bounced around from home to home. She doesn't get to see mom and dad together.
Mm-hmm.
It's taken an emotional toll on her. But you got to remember, guess who was checking in on Arabella? The same DFACS caseworker who's accused of inappropriate contact with children, right?
Nope.
He's the one who's caring for Arabella. He's the one that was whispering to her. He's the one that was, making inappropriate comments to her. He was doing all these things to Arabella. And I don't mean physically. I just mean he was playing emotional games with her. And it had an impact on Arabella's way of thinking. And yet, DFACS is saying, no, the best thing for these children was let's terminate parental rights and put them up for adoption, right? So I don't understand how one office could get it more wrong and be more twisted in their approach to the care of children than DFACS in Camden County.
Yep.
Wow.
It's just disgusting. All of it is
Yeah.
so wrong. It's so wrong.
It is disgusting. And, you know, I'm not in a position to judge. I'm not in a position to knock, you know, those DFACS employees. And I'm not trying to do that. I'm simply stating facts that DFACS is causing more harm than good,
Yep.
specifically in Camden County. And the family court judge in Camden County is doing more harm than good each and every time he refuses to listen to reason and refuses to listen to the testimony of experts who aren't on the payroll of the state.
Mm-mm. Oh my gosh.
I'm wondering now because I remember sometime that we talked that Florida has a pretty high reunification rate.
They do, yeah. They hover around 60%, I believe.
I wonder how, if they hadn't have gone back to Georgia, if they had stayed in Jacksonville or in Florida,
Yeah,
if that would have changed anything.
it could have. And the reason why I say that is, and I'll give you an example, hypothetical. Say, for instance, DFACS closes its case out against Corey and Diana, or the judge orders reunification, you know, pending more medical testing of Arabella, right? Say, for instance, that happens, and then Corey has his criminal charges dropped. They can move out of state, right? And then the DFACS case, although it might still be open in Georgia, could be transferred to another state where the unification rate either hovers at the national rate, which is around 52 or 53%, or higher, like in Florida, where it hovers around 60%. They can have their case transferred to a state where they're residing, and more than likely, that state where Corey and Dana would ultimately move to in this hypothetical situation would close that case out in order that their children be returned to them, pending no other issues.
Right.
So those are some options, and I'm sure, you know, those have been discussed. Corey and Diana probably discussed that with their defense team.
Yeah.
But those are hypothetical scenarios that could pan out if the family court judge in Camden come July 30th does the right thing and orders reunification of the Sullivan family.
Well, that's what we're hoping and praying for, and we'll definitely get on that email chain to DA Gibbons and start that, and I'll post it on our socials too, so that all of our listeners can send him an email.
Mm-hmm.
I would appreciate that. And if it's not on the main You Are the Power website, the youarethepower.net/Georgia, I will email you the template that we have specifically for the DA in Camden County.
Okay.
I'll email you that template, and you can share it with your listeners
Okay.
and have them send letters on behalf of Corey and Diana Sullivan and ask that he please drop the charges against Corey.
Yeah, absolutely.
We'll definitely do that for sure.
I just looked up some of our stats on the last few episodes. Out of the last 4, I think we have 6,000 or 7,000 downloads.
Which is
Huge.
Yeah, I feel
That's
like
amazing.
the ongoing coverage of this is actually helping. Like every week, it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
Mm-hmm.
So more people, like we're constantly getting messages on social media, like to Expired, but also like my personal pages where people are like, holy crap, how did I not know this was going on? Or, oh my God, like I don't live in Georgia, but I just emailed the governor, you know, blah, blah, blah. So people are hearing and are definitely joining all of us in making as much noise as possible.
I cannot thank you guys enough. As a matter of fact, I'm on my way down right now to have dinner with Corey and Diana. So we're definitely going to talk about this. I just want to express from them to you how thankful they are that you're willing to share their story. And not only that, I want to say thank you for your willingness to share all these stories and help us get these families reunited.
Absolutely. Anything we can do, please let us know, and we will definitely keep sharing this and keep talking about it, and until things change for all of them and more, because it's not even just them. I feel.
No, it's I've been on the phone with a mother this week in Arizona, another mother in Colorado, and a mother in Kentucky. They're all going through the same situation that like Corey and Diana and the rest of the families in Georgia are going through. So it's epidemic across the country. It's not just isolated here to Georgia. It's not isolated to Camden County. It's widespread throughout the nation.
Yeah. And it needs it, and people just don't know about it. And we're lucky to have this platform to educate and inform others on
what's going on
in their state and with their officials, because this is an election year and this is very, very, very important.
Yes, it is.
It is important. I thank you again, like, for having Tracy and Johnny on, or talking about Tyler and Carolyn's story. We're not done fighting for them. We're not done fighting for their freedom. And I appreciate your listeners taking a case like what the Alexanders are going through and taking that to heart and really, writing letters on their behalf. They're a young couple, and right now they're dealing with something that no family should have to contend with. And so I'm just thankful that you guys were able to have Carolyn's mom and dad on the show.
Yeah, it was great. It was a good talk.
It was very nice to hear from family members so closely connected, and it doesn't just affect one person or one couple or one child. Like, it's literally turning people's lives upside down, inside out. It's just, we just feel like it's so important. So we appreciate you for always coming on and being willing to talk to us and share with us like the factual things of the cases. That makes our job much easier.
I appreciate you guys think this. I appreciate you guys having us on and supporting the work of You Are the Power. If your listeners need anything from us, if you go to youarethepower.net, contact us. You can get in contact with us, send us an email, let us know what's going on, how you can get involved, how you can help. And we also have an app. You Are the Power has an app, so you can go onto Apple Store app and download it. I'll put you in contact with myself. It'll put you in contact with regional organizers and state organizers in the state that you live in. We'd love to hear from you. So if there's anything that we can do for your listeners, we're going to reciprocate this friendship and we'll return the favor. So please let us know if there's anything that we can do to help you all.
Awesome.
Definitely.
Well, tell Corey and Diana that we love them and we're thinking about them and we're praying for them. And any pictures that they want to share, just send them over to me.
Okay, I will email them to you. Do you think this is going to air on Monday?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I will send them to you tomorrow.
Okay.
We're almost down here in Camden County. We just hit a rainstorm, so we got about 20 more minutes to go before we're at Diana's house. But I'll get some pictures from her tonight,
Okay.
and I'll email them to you tomorrow.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much,
Thank
Ryan.
you.
Thank you. You guys have a great evening and have a great weekend.
Okay, you too.
Bye.
Bye, all.
So fucked up.